الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I want to reflect upon another companion of the Prophet ﷺ who became very famous later on in his life because he converted late in Islam when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Yathrib, Madinatul Munawwara. His story is interesting because he had a friend called Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And later on, Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu became a very important alim in Damascus, thanks largely to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Darda was a very successful merchant, business person in Madinatul Munawwara. And every morning when he would wake up, he would go to his idol, his statue that he worshipped, and he would anoint it with perfume and worship it, seeking its blessings. And then he would go out to Medina, into the city of Medina, into the marketplace of Medina to do business. And then he'd come home and carry on with his life. But it so happened that one day he had heard about the Muslims and that they were engaged in a battle of Badr. So he heard that these Muslims had fought with the non-Muslims and now they were returning. He asked some people, he said, do you know Abdullah ibn Rawaha? Do you know where he is? It's very interesting because here you have Abu Darda, who's not a Muslim, asking about his friend who's a Muslim, Abdullah ibn Rawaha. He said, is he okay? Is he okay? I hope he's not hurt or injured or killed. They said, no, he's fine. So on that he left and carried on with his business. Abdullah ibn Rawaha arrives back to Madinatul Munawwara. He loves his friend Abu Darda, who's not accepted Islam just yet. So he goes to his house. He asks his wife, Darda, that where is your husband, Abu Darda? She said, he's out doing business. So he said, can I come into your house and just wait around for him? She said, by all means. So he comes into his house, his friend's house, who's a non-Muslim, and he enters a room where he keeps this statue, this idol. Abdullah ibn Rawaha immediately brings out a hammer and destroys, like Ibrahim ﷺ did, this statue, this god, this deity that he worships, his friends worships. And then he leaves the home. The wife of Abu Darda sees this and she begins to panic. What am I going to say to my husband? That your friend came in, your best friend came in, and he destroyed this idol that we worship and we revere. The evening came, Abu Darda come home. He sees his wife crying and distraught. So he asks her, so what's happened? She said, you might want to go into that room and see what's happened. So he sees this idol that's completely destroyed on the floor. You can imagine that he has anger at first. He's filled with anger and vengeance that how could my friend Abdullah ibn Rawaha, that Muslim, do this to me? And eventually his anger subsides and then he reflects that, if this God cannot defend itself, then what kind of God is it? What kind of statue is worthy of worship when it cannot even defend itself? So he runs to his friend Abdullah ibn Rawaha and together they go to the Prophet ﷺ and they accept Islam. He accepts Islam in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So this is the story of Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu. After he becomes a Muslim, he begins to reflect that I've spent my entire life making money, but I really want to dedicate myself to knowledge. So initially he tries to do both. He tries to do business and he tries to seek knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah at the same time. He eventually realizes that this is not going to be possible for me. So he says, well, I'm going to set up my business next to the masjid, so at least I can pray salah there and I can learn some knowledge. So you can see he's having this zeal for knowledge which is increasing in him, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Eventually, he gives up his business and becomes completely engrossed almost in learning ilm of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And someone asked him, he said, why have you given up business? You're successful, you've got lots of money. Aapne kyun chhod diya? Why have you left this? He said, look, doing business is not haram. Allah mentions this in the Quran. وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعِ. Right? Doing business is halal for you. وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Riba is haram. So he says, look, it's not haram, but I want to dedicate myself to gain the rewards for the afterlife, the profit for the afterlife. So he engages in learning and seeking knowledge as well. And so he becomes less involved in money and more involved in learning knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ. Eventually he becomes so impoverished that they say that one day some mehman, some guests came to his house. Listen to this. This is a man of wealth. And he gave them some warm food. And then it was a cold and bitter night. So the guests were thinking that maybe he'll give us some blankets. He didn't give them any blankets. So they became concerned. So eventually they went to him in his bedroom. And before they could even ask, they said he had hardly anything to cover himself with himself. So how could he give something to his guests? So this is a qurbani, the sacrifice that Abdullah ibn Rawaha made for his friend Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu. In fact, during the Caliphate of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Abu Darda was made the wazir. He was made the minister or governor of Syria, Damascus. And then Umar insisted that he should go there and teach and take care of the affairs of the Muslims as well. When he arrived in Damascus, it is mentioned that he saw that the Muslims, because of the wealth now they have under Umar and the expansion of the Muslim Caliphate, he became very sad. He said that there's so much wealth and they've forgotten about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So immediately the same Abu Darda who was worshipping idols runs to the masjid. He goes to the marketplace and he makes ilan and he does da'wah to every single person that he meets, and he says, have you forgotten about Allah? Have you forgotten about His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Have you forgotten the days when we were in Madinatul Munawwara and Makkatul Mukarramah, when we were being persecuted and we had nothing? Have you forgotten what Allah has given to us, which is the success of the afterlife? And he began to call upon people to return back to the ways of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And I want to share something with you that he said in English. He says, is it reasonable that I see you gathering and hoarding what you do not eat, and erecting buildings in which you do not live, and holding out hopes for things that you cannot attain? In other words, you're having all this pomp and wealth, but for what purpose? To what ends? Is it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to only gain the worldly pursuits as well? And so he would do this regularly. In fact, once Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was going past a group of people. He was the minister, but look at his humility and the way he would do tarbiyah and the education of his community in Damascus. He says that they saw a man being beaten or insulted. So Abu Darda went there straight away. He arrived there and said, why are you shouting at this person? Why are you insulting this person? They said he's committed a grave sin. So listen to what Abu Darda says. Look, if you had seen this man and he had fallen into a well, what would you have done? They said, we would have pulled him out. So he said, what are you doing right now? You're not helping him right now. You're making it worse for him. Abu Darda said, look, what you're supposed to do is not insult him, but to reprimand him, to remind him, and tell him to come back to his ways, which is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And if he becomes like that, then he's your brother in Islam. Right? So the way of doing tarbiyah, the way of Islam people, is not to bring them down, but to bring them up. Just like if you saw someone falling into a ditch or a well, you wouldn't stand there and laugh at them or mock them. You go and try and help them. So in the same way, if you see someone committing a sin, if you see someone doing something wrong, you're supposed to help that person out of that well as well. In a place, Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala talks about the importance of the masjid. And he says that, look, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in good times, and Allah will also remember you in your difficult times as well. And then he says, be someone who becomes knowledgeable. Seek knowledge, be a good listener, and don't be ignorant unless you become ruined. Then he says, do not let go of the masjid. Make your house like a masjid. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the masjid is the house of every God-conscious person, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed serenity, comfort, mercy, and staying on the path leading to Jannah for those who make their masjids their places of worship, who make their homes like masajid. In other words, in your homes, just like in the masjid you treat it like a place of sacred importance, in the same way your masjid should be a place filled with zikr, filled with Quran, filled with tilawah, filled with ibadah. Make your homes like that. This is advice of Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Once he saw a group of people just standing on the side of the street in the marketplaces, and they were just laughing and joking among themselves. Abu Darda, who was one who would never hold back, he would go to them. He says, look, that go home, spend time in remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are you wasting your life behind the dunya and laughing and joking? Right? Life is very, very short. So he would give nasiha in this way to people as well. This is the level of Abu Darda. In fact, Abu Darda is known, radiallahu ta'ala an, as being one of the greatest alims in Damascus. If you look in the book of Hadith, they mention that people would flock to Damascus to learn Hadith from Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala, to get chains of transmission, to get isnad from him. This was a maqam of Abu Darda who, not so long ago in Medina, was worshipping idols and doing business, making lots and lots of money. Now he is in the business of spreading knowledge. Now he is in the business of spreading hadith. In fact, one of the most important hadiths you'll find, you'll have heard many ulama mention it, al-ulama warathatul anbiya. The scholars are the heirs of the prophets. The hadith is quite long, it continues. The narrator of that hadith is none other than Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Nearly every alim mentions it in the beginning of their books. Al-ulama warathatul anbiya. So this is the maqam of Abu Darda. And we should never lose hope because he became into Islam very, very late, right, in Madinatul Munawwara. But look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to him after he entered Islam. Allah gave him ukhrawi success. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him knowledge. Allah gave him fame in deen because he accepted Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he made sacrifice for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we make similar sacrifices in our life, despite our busy lives, I know we're all busy working, we should try and make some time for Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We should try and make some time in the community, give qurbani on the weekend, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. We should all do this, including me. We should all give some time because Allah is the one that gives you a rizq. Allah is the one that gives you a sustenance. And we should have yaqeen in that. That when we have yaqeen Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter how long or how hard I work, at the end of the day, Allah provides my sustenance. Right? And so this is very, very important as a foundational point for all of us to remember. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all tawfiq. Allah fill our masajids with people who worship Him constantly. Allah give us sincerity and protect us from all forms of evil and immorality. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu.